What does it take to create a vibrant, thriving life? First, the sad news is that Thoreau was right. Most people are leading quiet lives of desperation, lacking in meaning, fulfillment, and vitality. But we choose more. We choose to create extraordinary lives. And the Art of Vibrant Living show entertains you with inspiration, empowerment, and education to create your life into a masterpiece. It's time. Let's vibe up. Aloha, y'all. Welcome to the show. I am Daniel Aaron, your host. This is the Art of Vibrant Living show, and we have an amazing show. I'm so excited for today's show, y'all. First, let me tell you, just in case it's not obvious, the Art of Vibrant Living, what does that mean? Your birthright. And I would suggest, this might sound a little bit pushy, but I suggest actually it's your obligation to live a vibrant, thriving, extraordinary, amazing, wonderful, fantastic, life-filled, purpose-filled, prosperity-filled life. Because we have the technology, it's possible. And that's what we are all about on this show, y'all, is entertaining you. Yes, there'll be some cool stories, and even better, empowering you. My suggestion, my request of you today is please take at least one thing and say, that's cool, and apply it, right? Try it out. Do something with it in your life. You're going to get so many opportunities for that. Because, so excited, our guest today, Judy Thureson. Hopefully I pronounced her name correctly. I've never said her last name out loud. Oh, goodness. Amazing, amazing woman. An author, a coach, a speaker, an event producer, a woman of power, beauty, grace, and authenticity. She's written a #1 best-selling book called Beautiful Tragedy, which I will ask her about, and hopefully she'll tell us about soon. And such a pleasure to have you here with us, Judy. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. What a beautiful introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, awesome. So I have a slight advantage over our audience in that I know you a little bit, and we have some friends in common. For the audience that may not know you yet, would you be up for sharing a little bit about who you are and how you got here to this point? Author, coach, best-selling author, speaker, event producer, super positive. How'd you do that?
Wow, I think we need like 2 weeks. I'm one of those people, I've had several lives. So starting with my professional career, I was actually a professional dancer. Back in the 80s, when MTV was a thing, that was my biggest goal in life is, what can I do to be in a music video, right? And I did that. I toured and I traveled, and then I went behind the camera and did some work behind the scenes with talent, being a talent agent and event producer for different shows. After that, I actually went into ministry, if you can believe that, and started, really young, being interested in serving people, being interested in holding space, and really just loving people who were hurting. So that's always been an innate part of who I am. After that, I got married, stayed home, raising my children. And about the eve of my 40th birthday, I realized I want to come out of retirement. And it seemed like health and wellness was a great segue coming from a professional dancer background. And so I started fitness classes, and I, started it off just as a hobby and thought, hey, how can I bring my friends along? We all just had babies together, and everyone's trying to, get fit, get in shape. And this was before social media. And so I remember just putting out a little email saying, hey, I'm going to be at the park. If you guys want to work out with me, let's put together a little, boot camp at the park. thinking maybe 3 or 4 friends would show up. Well, those 3 or 4 friends sent out emails to their friends. And the first day, we ended up having over 20 people there. And then the end of that week, we had, more people. And by the end of the 3 years, I had opened 6 locations, hired 4 trainers, and had a full-on business kind of by accident. And again, that was a great segue and evolved into more of a life coaching and just really supporting women specifically into living their most vibrant life. I mean, I love the title of your show here, because it is really about living and thriving, living our best life. And as you know, there's many pitfalls that life happens. And 2019, I lost my son, Jacob. He was only 18 years old. And I have always wanted to be an author. And writing my book, Beautiful Tragedy, that was not the book that I thought I was going to write. Right. And so I say this all the time, is that sometimes we choose our purpose, but other times our purpose chooses us. And this was not the lane I would have picked. But now my life's purpose is to, really bring to light, mental health, substance abuse, childhood trauma, really helping people heal from the inside out. And as painful and challenging as it is beautiful and tragic at the same time. But being able to help people along with the tools that I've been given has been a real gift.
Thank you. Well, gosh, there's like 480 questions that come to me after you shared what you just did. And so let's start with this. One, I'm so sorry about Jacob. In my own family, I grew up around a lot of death when I was young. And I know that one of the, things happen in life, and we can't say that anything, well, we can say something shouldn't have happened, but of course that's a recipe for suffering. So, reality rules, and we could look at life from the perspective that what should happen? Well, exactly what has happened, right? And, to speak of your experience of turning lemons into lemonade is way too simplistic and small a way of saying it. However, what I will say is, there's something that feels just, I don't know, on the human level wrong. And I use those, quotation marks, but wrong about a parent losing their child or a child dying before the parent. And I know my own mother, she had 2 of her children die before her, one of them from substance abuse and mental illness. And my mother never really recovered from that. She never healed from it. And as I was learning more about you, Judy, I saw the timeline of, right, Jacob's passing was 2019. Your book came out, I think, in 2020.
Right.
And that's, I mean, who knows what the right speed is, but that, like I looked at those dates and I was like, wow, that's amazing that you were able to like take the tragedy of that and find the beauty of it and then bring it out to the world as a gift, as a service in such a short period of time. Does that make sense? And what was your experience of that?
Wow. Well, I have like chills all over because it was supernatural. If it would have been on my own timeline, I can guarantee you that this book would not have ever been published. Before the show, we were kind of talking about how I'm very open and unfiltered and authentic. And so when you read my book, it's pretty much like reading my journals. And the morning of June 13, 2019, Eric and I were having breakfast, and we were talking about this new meditation mindfulness program that I was going to launch into the world. It was something that was so powerful, something I was so passionate about, that was the missing link in my life. I was sharing, I've been into fitness and wellness and, mindset coaching, but this meditation mindfulness practice that I had developed, I really felt like needed to be launched into the world. And so that morning at breakfast, I told Eric, I feel a little apprehensive doing this because every time I try to do something for me, something bad happens to Jacob. And he says, oh, that's, you're just saying that, you're going to be, it's fine. It's going to be fine. We're going to launch this and this is your thing. We're going to do this together. I said, okay. And I don't know if it was just mother's instinct or premonition. I don't know. But about an hour later, I get a phone call after Eric left for work. I get a phone call about an hour after that conversation. And it was Jacob's girlfriend saying that Jacob was found unresponsive and he was being rushed to the emergency room. And so little did I know that these tools that I was getting ready to birth into the world were actually the tools that I needed for me at this time to walk me through this, dark night of the soul season of my life. And so fast forward, we make it to LA and Jacob is in a coma for 2 weeks and he never regains consciousness. Sadly, he passes June 27th, 2019. And every single day I was journaling from the moment that I got that phone call all the way to his passing, all the way to his memorial and the funeral. And so my book is a 40-day snippet. It's 40 chapters and it's every single day from the moment that I got that phone call. And every day, part of the meditation practice is being still and being silent and listening for the word, for the intention that for me, what spirit is to give me for the day. And so some days were just one word, surrender. One day it was either a phrase of lean into the pain. So all these little snippets of what I would hear the spirit tell me in that 40-day period, I would write them down and, journal them. And those became the chapter titles for the book. So when you look at the timeline of, Jacob passed June 27th of 2019, my book launched March of 2020. It was very short because it was in real time. I mean, you're getting the real emotions. And I'm really glad that it was that way because if I would have waited like 4 or 5 years, I don't know if you would get the rawness and the freshness of really what I'm feeling in the moment. And so it's very powerful. So back to the supernatural part, September of 2019, I come back home from LA because that's where Jacob was living. And after all the arrangements and everything, come back home trying to pick up the pieces. Let me put a pause right here. Back to what you were saying about it's unnatural for a parent to bury their child. There's not even a word in the English language. If you think about it, there's orphans, there's widows, there's widower, but there's not a name in the dictionary for a parent who loses a child because it's not the right order of things. We can't even fathom it. You as a parent, I'm sure, I think that's why this resonates so much for us as parents because we couldn't imagine, right? And so back to September, fast forward, I'm having lunch with a friend, coffee with a friend, and she says to me through tears, Judy, you need to write a book. I've been following your journey. I was very vocal on social media about my journey with Jacob. And she said, it's so inspiring. There's so much hope. You need to write a book. And to be honest, inside I was very offended because I thought that is the last thing I'm thinking about right now is writing a book. How dare you even ask me to say that? And I didn't say it out loud, but inside I'm feeling like that's the last thing on my mind right now. I go to bed that night. In the middle of the night, whether it's an audible voice or a dream, a vision, I don't know, but this voice says, Judy, you're a writer. And it wasn't a nice, encouraging, like, hey, you're a writer, go do it. It was almost angry and said, stop making excuses and write this book. So the next day when I woke up, I started writing on my phone with my thumbs. 18 days later, this book poured out of me. 18 days, 45,000 words, and the book was written. Now, fast forward to that, March of 2020. Do you remember what's happening March of 2020?
Some vague recollection of that period. Yes.
Where the whole world was pretty shut down at that time, right?
Yeah.
And at this point, we had already launched the book. Pre-orders were already sold. Hundreds of books were already pre-sold. And I went into deep fear. My editor, the publisher, said, you need to go through one last edit round. When it's ready to go, it's going to go to print. So I remember very clearly that day, I could not even open my computer. I was paralyzed with fear. And I turned around and I looked at my husband, Eric, and I said, turn off the website, refund everyone's money. I'm not going to launch the book. I'm not doing it. Because for me, I knew that once that goes public, there's no taking it back. And it was so raw and so vulnerable that I just got scared. So I'm in the backyard, I'm crying, I'm having, a meltdown. And I get a text message from a friend saying, hey, Judy, a friend of mine has a message to you from Jacob. Are you open to hearing it? Now, I come from a very fundamental Christian background, in a box. So messages from the dead was not something I was used to. Well, just wasn't part of my life. So when she said, hey, I have a message to you. Are you open to hearing it? I said, sure, I'll listen. What do I have to lose? So she said, okay, I'm going to give her your phone number. So she gives this woman my phone number. She calls me, right? And this is the day when I said, I'm not launching the book. I'm in the backyard. I'm melting down and I get this text message. I cannot even make this up. It's in the book. I write about it. So this woman calls me and she says, Judy, I have a message to you from a Jacob. I don't know if this is going to make any sense to you, but he said he wants you to hurry up and finish because he wants his story to be told. So when I say that if it was up to me, this book would not be out there. Supernaturally, God, Jesus, Jacob, whoever said, no, you're doing this. And we're pushing you to do this. And since then, I'm so proud that this book has saved lives. My son was 18. He was a rapper. He was an artist. He had a fan base. People have written to us and said, because after reading your book, I wanted to commit suicide. And after reading your book, I decided to stay. Or I was addicted to drugs. After reading your book, I threw all my pills down the toilet and turned myself in and went to rehab. And it's just countless of stories like this. So this is a legacy book for me. Maybe not a New York Times bestseller, but I don't care. What I care about is the saved lives and the legacy and the purpose and Jacob's death not being in vain. So it's just a very powerful story. And thank you for asking.
Wow. Goodness. I'm nearly speechless, which is a rare thing for me. I got chicken skin goosebumps several times as you were describing that journey. And well, first thing, thank you for your vulnerability in your vulnerability in sharing that with us, and your vulnerability in what you brought to the book in that process. And I wasn't tuned in. We didn't know each other then, but what you described with your social media presence around it, I can feel the vulnerability in that. And, to take something that is such a tragedy and so difficult and so private. And I don't know if you had the experience of this or not, but I know, like, for my mother and a lot of people, my mother, one of hers was one of her children killed themselves also, right?
Wow.
Directly. And so there's often, even though it's not deserved, there's a sense of shame or guilt that can come for a parent burying their child. because again, it's not the natural order of things. And I didn't know that about there being not being a word for that in English. And that's fascinating, and scary and weird. And we should do so. I will do something about that. I don't know what yet, but coming back around though, for you to, so understandable that you had that moment of like melting down. I'm not going to do this. Forget it. Right. And sure, why not? I mean, it's such a private and painful thing, yet that you were then open to hearing this message that was not part of your normal way of doing things from your background. And then to have the courage and vulnerability to say, all right, let's hit go on this and bring it out. That's such an act of vulnerability and courage and power and generosity. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you. Thank you for noticing. And, part of it was also me being a little defiant, because to your point, as I'm sharing these things on social media and being super vocal and visible about my journey, I have people in my messenger, my DMs saying, me too. And these are pastors, police officers, people in leadership positions who didn't feel like they could be open about what was happening in their lives because of shame, stigma, status, right? My husband, Eric, is right now in the middle of filming a documentary, for this exact same reason. I think the more that we talk about it, the more we give others permission. My heart goes out to your mom, right? Because I know that's, any of us can be there so easily. But for me, I felt almost this defiance of, I'm going to be in the front lines. And if I have to take the heat so that other people can have this safe space to share and talk, I mean, it makes me emotional because it's so important. It's already, we suffer in silence and we don't have to. Healing happens in shared communities where we can share our pain with one another. Do you know that our tears, there's certain tears that when it's a different type of tear, grief tears, the little bubble, so that when you are visible, when you're face to face someone, that there's certain tears that you can differentiate. Isn't that interesting? There's tears of joy, there's tears of grief, there's tears of pain, but even our tears have a certain analgesic that is a painkiller. So when we stop people from feeling their emotions, what we're really saying is, hey, don't heal. Stay, I don't want to say broken, because grief is not being broken. It's just a natural emotion that it's what helps us to remember that we're human. It's a full gamut of emotions that we have, and we can't pick and choose them. So I'm very free with expressing all the feelings because all of them are good.
Hallelujah. Thank you. Yes, I am so with you. And, I'm with you. It's not broken, though another way was saying maybe is broken open, right? And that's like, this is a weird jump. I'll bring it back in a second. But I remember I love stories, right? That's always been an important part for me, is stories, reading novels or films, or right, because that's part of how I come to a greater understanding of people and the world and myself. And I remember reading I guess it was a testimonial to a novel one time, and it said something about, I'll paraphrase it because I don't remember exactly, but this novel does what any great novel should do. It makes you sad and afraid, and it breaks you open, and it breaks your heart, and then it allows you to put it all back together in a new way, right? And there's this part of Japanese philosophy. I think the word is
kintsugi. Yes.
Is that right? Did I say
yes.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So you want to say what it means then, because you're living it, right?
Well, it's a Japanese pottery that when it's broken, they don't just toss it; they put it back together, and they actually put it back together with gold. so that you see the cracks are all, put together with gold. And it's what makes us beautiful. Those broken pieces, those cracks, it's breaking you open. Rumi says it's where the light comes in, right? So not fearing that or not hiding that and not shying away from that is really running towards it, because that's really how we get to feel our full humanity. And that is what bridges our gap. That is what connects us. Pain connects us more than success or, all these accolades or accomplishments. Like, that's great, but really this is the real deal. Soul to soul, heart to heart, our brokenness, the feelings of pain is really what connects us and brings us closer together. And I feel like my book really does that. And the purpose and the intention is, with my book, is I wanted grieving families to not feel alone in their grief. And if they can just feel like, hey, there's one person that gets me and understands what I'm going through, then my goal was accomplished.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was the next place I was going, is that you had this level of courage and vulnerability and rawness, and then to overcome with clearly divine intervention and assistance through those synchronicities. Can't make that up. I'm with you. To overcome all of that, though, and then say, all right, it's going out in the world. And then to be receiving the feedback from people that it's changing their lives or keeping them alive. I mean, that's just such a beautiful thing, and such a testament to you and your courage in doing that. So
thank you.
What does it mean for you now? Like, what after that experience, losing Jacob, and also the experience of the book, how has that changed you or changed your life going forward?
Whew. Again, that's such a loaded question, because, in a weird way, I actually feel closer to Jacob now, even though he's on the other side of the veil. He's very present. I get many signs. I get many nudges. There's so many things that he has led me to. We were talking earlier before, there's a mentor of mine, Steve Hardison, who he's considered the ultimate coach, and to work with him, he charges like $200,000, something crazy like that, right? And he put out a contest and said, write to me and tell me why I should pick you. I'm driving to California from Arizona, and I'm picking someone to ride in the car with me. And at that point, that was your only access to him, was if you paid him that kind of money. And we know that's a very limited amount of people that can do that. So of course I was excited to put my name in the hat. And in my essay, or, my message to him was really just sharing about Jacob, and how Jacob was my greatest teacher. And what Jacob taught me was how to live my life out loud and authentically, and to not worry about tomorrow, because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so the whole spirit of my essay was, I'm putting my name in the hat, because I'm just going to live full out. Whether you choose me or not, I'm going to put myself out there. And, and I got picked to go. And since then, Steve and I have developed this beautiful relationship where Jacob comes to Steve in dreams and has told Steve to do things that Steve wouldn't normally do. And as long as whatever it is impacting the greater good and is helping transform lives, Steve will say yes to it. And Jacob has been the catalyst to really get Steve to do those things. So it's really fascinating. And as that whole book with the ultimate coach and Steve Hardison has created a global movement, and I've been able to spearhead these events. And those things would not have happened had it not been for Jacob. And when I see the ripple effect of the lives being transformed on so many levels, it's very humbling to be a part of that.
Oh, it's beautiful. So Goodness. Okay. Thank you. Once again, what you said opens up like 400 questions for me. Um,
I told you
and
we could be here 2 weeks, Daniel.
I know. I love it. And that's one of my favorite things is when there is like a juicy conversation when there's, and I'm naturally curious, and you've got so much wisdom and experience to share. So of all these options, let's go here. Because you and I, we both work as coaches. Funnily enough, I was doing a presentation earlier today to a bunch of non-coaches, and speaking about how this profession of coaching, and it's now considered a profession, not just some weird thing over there, it's growing so strongly and getting recognized. And yet still most people in the world are like, what do you mean coaching? Like, doesn't make sense to them. Because mostly people still think of it as related to like the high school football coach or something.
Right.
So I love that you had that experience with Steve Hardison. You said, all right, I'm gonna put my name in the hat and go for this ride, and that you were chosen. And you said earlier, like, you spend that much time with him, or I guess another way of saying it might be with such an extraordinary being or such an extraordinary coach. And he is, he's a person just like all of us, yet as a being, as a coach, as a luminary, there's something extraordinary about it. One of the things you said is life will never be the same. So in some way, I'm asking this question like, so what happened? But in another way, I'm saying like, what can happen for people when they meet themselves in that format, or when they're with a powerful coach or have a powerful coaching experience? I know. So I'll stop talking in a minute, I promise. I know you this wasn't set up for you like, oh, I'm going to go on a 6-hour coaching session. We're just going to be sitting in a car. That wasn't the setup for it. Yet we also know that for us who care about people, we're always in some way coaching if people are open to it, because it's really just like, how can I be of service? How can I help this person to create more of what they want in their life, right? Which sounds like that's been a part of who you are always. So with that ever so long, ridiculous prelude to my question, what was your experience and how did it change you?
Again, another loaded question, right? And not to sound so like cliche, but really his example of who he was being taught me more than what he actually said. At one point, I was in there was 3 of us that drove with him from Arizona to California. And then we had to figure out how to get back home, because then he picked up another 3 from California back to Arizona. So we're affectionately known as the 6-pack. So there were 6 of us total that had this opportunity. And I had the honor of being in the front seat with Steve. So I'm sitting there and I have a pad and a notepad and a pen, and I'm taking notes as he's talking. At one point he looks at me, he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm, taking down all these golden nuggets." And he says, "That's silly, because I'm sharing about a situation with this other person. If I were coaching you, I'd tell you something completely different. This is not like a one size fit all, wisdom or advice." And he said, "If I were you, it'd probably be better to just be present." It's like, oh, okay. So I put it away so that I can just really absorb who he's being. And there were 3 or 2 really important things that I knew if I had an opportunity to be with him, what would I ask him? Number 1 is, if I could only read one book for the rest of my life, what book would it be? And without, without a pause, you said Way of Mastery. It's like, that's the book. I said, okay. And then the second thing I asked was, I'm naturally a manifester. Ever since I was a little kid, like if I want something, it would just magically appear. And so I asked Steve, I said, I'm feeling kind of like the miracles are running out. Like my magic powers are running out. Miracles always happen for me, but I feel like I've been a little bit too greedy because they just happen all the time. And I'm afraid they're not going to happen anymore. Like, what should I do with that? And very simply, he says to me, he says, well, why don't you just stay with the first thought that miracles happen for you? And when those other thoughts come in, just don't think them. So easy and simple, yet so profound. And like that little thing has shifted me in so many ways because, I grew up also with a lot of trauma. And so one of the trauma responses is waiting for the other shoe to drop. Have you ever heard that term before?
Yeah, for sure.
And so if something's too good, it's too good to be true. You got to wait. There's something bad that's going to happen around the corner. So I was always setting myself up for that kind of that drop, that fall. And Steve saying that to me really shifted me into, I can shift my being and create my thoughts all the time. And when the other thoughts come that are not useful or negative, I can shift it back to what's creative, what's miraculous, what's positive, what's lovely. And so that one little interaction literally has shifted my life, my marriage, my family, my business, my finances, you name it. And it all starts with the thought. So simple, yet so profound and so powerful, but it's a practice. It's a practice. So those are a couple of the big nuggets that really shifted me from being with him. And of course, the opportunity of being able to create the Ultimate Experience event and the doors that have opened for me, with my coaching business and the relationships and the contacts and the networking that I've been able to create and connect with has been just miraculous and powerful. And when you have a certain intention, you're vibrating at a certain level frequency of, this is my purpose, this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to serve the world. The universe conspires to bring the right people in your path to help guide you towards that goal and that intention. And I feel like that is my life right now, and it's beautiful.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you. I love that. Okay, a couple things I want to reflect back or highlight from what you said because it's so important. Well, and one, let me rewind a minute for anybody that's tuning in with us either live or by rebroadcast to make sure you're on the same page here. Who Judy is talking about is a man named Steve Hardison, who did not give himself the title The Ultimate Coach, didn't want a book written about him. Nonetheless, that's what occurred. And he is an extraordinary coach, an extraordinary leader and being. And the book is fantastic. So, if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, great to get the book whose title is The Ultimate Coach. It's a book that has changed many, many, many people's lives in a similar yet different way than what you're talking about, Judy. If you had the experience of being next to him in the car, and so you received something from his being or his modeling, right, that affected you, that inspired you, that showed you new possibilities. And the same is true in a different way from the book, right? So people can have that experience, and now there's a whole community and movement, as you said, that offers access to that in some way too. And I love that you said it's a process, right? As you said, and I noticed as you were speaking, you said, oh gosh, I don't know if I remember the exact phrase you said, but the way I observed it, and tell me if this is memorable to you or makes sense. But you started to speak something, and then you caught yourself. You were using the present tense, and then you caught yourself and said, "I used to do it this way."
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Right. And that's just like, it's beautiful. I wish I remembered the exact phrasing. I was something.
Well, I said, I always do this. And then I caught myself and I shifted and said, I used to do this. Right. Because what we identify with is who we become. So if I say, oh, I'm always anxious or I'm always, worried or I'm always struggling, then that's how I'm going to shift my being. I always say, our mind, our body, our spirit, its only job is to make true what we tell it. So why don't we tell it something different that we actually want versus what we don't want?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I highlight that for one, because, here you are very successful in multiple ways in your life. And it's great to model. You're still working this stuff, right? You caught yourself in that moment. And also selfishly, I feel like I'm with my clients and students so often saying, hold on, did you hear what you just said? Hold on, the language is so important. It's like every day I'm having conversations like that. So it's fun to have someone else engaging in the importance of the way language affects thought. And that was just what you were saying, the simplicity from Steve of, well, why don't you think the first part, but not the second part?
Sounds silly, but it's so true. And first of all, can I just acknowledge you, Daniel? You are an incredible listener, reflector, and interviewer, and I just love our interaction. I really feel your presence and your being. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for that.
Oh, thank you. Super kind of you. Something else you said reminded me of, did you ever see a movie called Being There?
No, never heard of it.
I remember a spiritual teacher of mine 25 years ago speaking about it as, this is the best film example of presence, right? And his languaging, this teacher, who's quite an extraordinary dude, was all about presence, being absolutely present in the moment, which is no different than what Steve's teaching or modeling, and just maybe with different language sometimes, with being, right? And this film, I'm super excited now because I haven't thought of it for years and I want to go back and see it. It's about a gardener in England who is incredibly simplistic, yet so much natural wisdom comes from him that he through a weird series of events ends up being like advisor to the prime minister, and he would get these questions and they'd say, well, what do you think about this? And and he would appear like he's not really all there, and he would say something like, well, in the spring the daffodils come up, and it wouldn't seem to make sense to anybody else, but people would connect somehow. But it was really about his presence, his being, that inspired others. I'm probably not doing it justice. I'll have to go back and watch it again, then I'll come back and report.
Oh, I'll have to watch it. Yeah, that sounds great. But when I met Steve, I had a copy. I'd read the copy manuscript of The Ultimate Coach. It had not been released yet. And I have to say that the book doesn't do him justice, right? And this isn't about like Steve worship or anything. It's, I come from an entertainment background, right? So I'm used to seeing celebrities on camera, but yet when I know them in real life, it's not congruent. It's totally a persona, and usually who I meet in person is not the same person. And sometimes I wish I wish I didn't know that about you because, I used to like you. And so when I first met Steve, to be honest, I kind of went in with that lens because that's something, I'm very sensitive to of, all right, let me sniff out anything that's not authentic, does he match what I've read in the book, in the manuscript? And I can honestly say that the book doesn't even do him justice. Like who he is being, that presence that you're talking about. When you're around him, you feel like you're the only person on the planet. And it's such a beautiful just state of being. And what I love about this, again, it's not about Steve worship, but it's about seeing what's possible for me. Since being around him and learning those traits from him, I can be that for others, where I'm so present with them that they're the only one that's in the room. They're the most important person in my field, that's in front of me at the time. And so that's what I love about Steve is really what he helps you see are the possibilities of what you can be. He's not like, I'm up here and, worship me. It's like, no, I'm here and you can be too. There's nothing about me that you can't do. I'm the same as you, and really means that. And I feel like for me, that has helped me grow so much into stepping into the possibility of the potential that I have.
That's beautiful. And I appreciate that you brought that forward, because that's, I think that's what is, wow, that's what, how do I want to say it? It's so important and it's so easily overlooked. And for all of us that are motivated to be of support or help, whether it's teaching, coaching, consulting, therapy, healing, whatever it is, to continually be empowering the people that we are with. And when I say empowering, meaning you have the power. It's not over here.
Yeah.
I remember we spoke for a moment before about astrology. And I remember when I first started working professionally with astrology, which I don't do very often, but when I first did it, one of the shocking things to me was how much people, like when I would be doing a consultation for someone, a reading, how much power they would place on me and what they perceived, imagined that I saw in their chart. And it really like threw me for a loop in the beginning. I was like, well, no, it's not, I don't have it. The chart doesn't have it. You have it. This is just a tool to see you. So, but let me rewind, because it's come to me like 3 times. I really want to ask you about this. You just mentioned again your experience in, with celebrities, and you spoke earlier about your early experience of being a performer, an artist, a dancer, being on stage, music videos, and right. And that takes a courage, that takes a well-developed ego. I'll come back to that word in a minute, but a healthy ego to be to be on stage, to have people look at you, right? And to shine in some way. And yet you also mentioned, when you were telling us about you earlier on, about how you went into the ministry and you've always had this desire to be of service, to help other people, to, I don't know, ease their pain in some way. And then you talked about the incongruence that you often saw with some celebrities, right? And it was just an act, but in real life, they were, different than what we saw on stage. And super long question again, but I promise it'll make sense in a moment. And I'm so excited to hear what comes for you, whatever it is. I've had my own experiences with celebrities, and I've had my own experiences of being on stage or performing in ways. And I think, and as a culture, we've got this like reverence we have for celebrities, right? A celebrity says, "Oh, I use this product," and boom, everybody buys that. They don't know anything about it. It's ridiculous the way we worship them sometimes. Yeah, and then others sometimes criticize them. Well, they're nobody. They're just like me. However, it does seem to me that they often have an ability, and maybe that's part of what you saw in Steve too, an ability to get themselves out of the way, their worries, their fears, their self-orientation. So when they're in that moment of on camera or on stage or whatever it is, that there isn't all this other stuff in the way. And I think that's something that you have in different ways that served you as an artist, as a dancer, as a coach, clearly in putting the book forward, that served you. You're like, all right, I'm going to get my fears out of the way. So all that said, ego as a word gets a lot of bashing, and, understandably, and for good reason in some ways, because it's a bummer if it runs the show. However, to have a strong enough ego that allows someone to step forward, to be visible, to be in a position where they are seen, sometimes is really important. So, gosh, all that said, what are your thoughts about putting oneself forward and the ability to get out of the way in order to be present for another one, or whatever comes to you? I spoke for 3 hours there. Sorry.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm going to back to my dancing days. and being visible and being on stage and being on MTV and going on tours. And I wish I can tell you it was because I was, emotionally intelligent and mature and I can handle it. But as a young kid, 18, that's all I ever wanted. Thought if I ever make it on MTV, I've arrived, I've accomplished, my ultimate dream at that point. And when I got there, I was anorexic, I was bulimic, I was insecure. I thought I was the worst one in the room. I had such low self-esteem issues, unworthiness, lack of value, you name it. So I couldn't even enjoy the quote unquote success because I was so much in my head of feeling of I was not enough. And so I would self-sabotage myself. I was the one that would get so close to the big break. I was almost a Janet Jackson backup dancer back in the day. I made it out of 2,500 girls. I made it down to the last 12 and they needed 6. And when I was in the last 12, my being already decided, oh, I'm not good enough to make it. So I'm sure I'm not going to make it. So what do you think happened?
Didn't make it.
I didn't make it, right? Do you remember the show In Living Color, the Fly Girls? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So I made it down to the last 4 girls of the Fly Girls. And, I had so many amazing people who believed in me. They could only get me so far. They can help open the door. But if I don't show up and really believe in myself, and if I already shoot myself in the foot and say, oh, I'm probably not going to get it, this is too good to be true, all those thoughts, what do you think happened? So I didn't get it, right? Yeah. And so, man, if I know now, what I know now back then, oh my goodness, I'd be unstoppable, right? But I think God has a sense of humor there because it's like, no, talk about ego. Your ego would really, really be too big if you have the wisdom you have now back in your 20s. So I say all that to say that it's just always a layer, unlayering those belief systems that we have about us. That's why I love being a coach, because I've actually experienced it for myself and I've done the work. So I'm so confident that I can really help someone do the work, right? It's not theory. It's not something from a book or certification. It's my lived experience of how do you take these layers of the low self-worth, of the lack of value, of oh, I'm not enough, and all these things. I mean, to be honest, when I first met Steve, that was only 3 years ago. I went through a major crisis of, oh my gosh, he's saying all these nice things to me. He's probably just said that to everybody and he must be lying. And, how can he say all these good things about me? And who am I? And I'm nobody. And like, this is where I was just 3 years ago. And so I've been having to do this work layer by layer of because if we don't feel those things about ourselves, it doesn't matter if the ultimate coach is telling you you're awesome. If you don't think you're awesome, Jesus himself can tell you you're amazing. If you don't feel like you're amazing, you're not going to be able to receive it. So it's been a work in progress. It's been so much, but so fun, right? Because the more layers you peel off, the more you see what's possible, the more you see like, wow, like the more that I dig into who I really am, I actually love myself more. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was in there the whole time. And I'm trying to be like this or like that, or I'm trying to get this validation from somewhere else when all the while, all the power is within. Again, sounds a little cliche, but it's so true. The more that I tap into the real me, the more powerful I feel and the more love I have for myself. And the more love I have for myself, the more love I have for others. So I don't know if I answered your question, but we're just kind of going around and around.
My secret plan was to introduce 12 things that I find really interesting and important and just see which ones you go into because I want to hear from you. And that was beautiful what you said. And So here's one of the things that comes to me, Judy. You just mentioned self-love, right? And I thought of this wonderful truism. Oops, there we go. It's celebration. This wonderful truism that you can't take anybody deeper than you've been yourself, right? That's
100%, right.
true in therapy. It's true in coaching. It's true, just universally true. And, part of what's brilliant and amazing about you is you have such a high level of authenticity and vulnerability, right? When you shared like what your experience was when you were a young dancer, when you shared your experience with Jacob's passing, when you shared your experience just recently when Steve was giving you accolades, right? Your ability to be open and real and honest and vulnerable is extraordinary. And again, going back to so many of us have this modeling that, I have to present this polished, I got it all together thing to the world, and otherwise people are going to think I'm an idiot or whatever. How do you do that?
How do I do that?
How you don't do what I do. You have this way of being real and authentic and vulnerable that's extraordinary. And I don't know, maybe you're the fish in the fishbowl and you don't even realize it.
I just feel like it's so normal for me. And actually I get shocked when people are not. Right. So it's been kind of a rough week where I've had some people in my life who I thought were in integrity and then realized they weren't. And I still get shocked. I'm in, I've been to therapy and I'm not shy about it. Right. And I remember my therapist telling me once, Judy, why do you think people are like you? Just because you have high integrity doesn't mean everyone else has that same level of high integrity. And I just couldn't even understand what that meant. I couldn't fathom it. Right. Because like you said, if I'm this way, I just expect people to be vulnerable and open and honest and have integrity. So sometimes it gets me into trouble. I feel like I can be a little naive sometimes because I really look at life through that lens of why wouldn't someone be honest with me? I'm honest with them. Right. So I don't really have a good answer for you, Daniel. And you're right. I think it is kind of like I don't really see it because I live it. And my husband tells me all the time, he's like, honey, you're not normal. Like, this isn't normal way of being. Like what how you show up isn't normal. And I'm like, really? Because it feels normal to me.
Yeah. Well, a friend of mine wrote
One more thing.
Please.
One more thing before I forget. I think this way of being for me is what gives me peace. Because I don't have to wonder, oh my gosh, what did I say to that person? How did I show up for that person? Let me put on that mask. Let me, be this person and this person. And that's exhausting. I mean, I did that my whole life. And so I think when maybe in my 40s is when I came into this being comfortable in my own skin. I started practicing yoga, really got to understand being in my body. Even though I was a dancer, I didn't understand being in my body. Like I said, I've had a lot of trauma in my life. So most of my life, I was very disconnected and disassociated from myself. That was my defense mechanism of protecting myself. And so I think once I started to really peel those layers, I started to really see the value and the peace that it brought me. Like that's the new wealth. I mean, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have peace, you are poor.
Hallelujah. That's beautiful. I'm with you. And I'm so holding myself back now because I've got so many questions, yet we're just about out of time. So it means I need to ask you the final question, the big question. Could I do that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it's so big, it's impossible to answer, which also on the flip side means you can't get it wrong. And it's because you've got so much wisdom and experience and heart. And yet I am asking you to boil all of that down to distill everything into, if you had one thing to say to our audience to help them to create their most vibrant, thriving life, what's the one thing you would share?
I would say that all we have is this present moment. So even with my book and with Jacob's death and everything that I've been through, I don't live in the why, because the why it'll spiral me down to all the questions, the should have, the could have, would have, right? I live in the what. What can I do today with what I've been given? And being present with that and serving with that and loving with that and being that. It's really powerful. Oops, sorry. I don't know where that's coming from.
That's all right. All good. I love
Technical
what you said.
difficulties. Okay.
I was with one of my yoga teachers years ago, big room of people, and it was like one of those silent moments, like 200 people, silent moment. And right in the middle of the silence, somebody's cell phone goes off. And the teacher, brilliant, one of my favorite moments ever, he says, and he's acting, I didn't know it at the time, he's acting, he says, "When are we going to learn?" You know, and all of us thought like, yeah, when are we going to learn to turn our cell phone off? And then he paused, a good dramatic moment. And then he goes, "Cell phone rings, breathe in. Cell phone rings, breathe out." Right. And I love your the one thing you had to say there, Judy, because you spoke about presence. And when you did, you paused, and there was a presence that you were being that came through and carried that message. So beautiful. I love it. Thank you again for just your vulnerability, your courage, your wisdom that has brought you through so many challenges and adventures and learnings in your life. And thank you for the generosity of continually cultivating that to bring it forward and be of service to others. And thank you for investing the time to be with us here on the show today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was so much fun. And thank you for having me. That was awesome.
An honor. And for y'all guests, audience, live or by rebroadcast, remember, take one thing. There were so many, but please take at least one thing, one of these beautiful pieces of wisdom that Judy has brought forward today, and apply it in your life. That's where the rubber meets the road. You have the power. It's your birthright. It's your duty to live a vibrant, extraordinary life. And I'm so grateful to you for being interested in that, for being here with us. That's amazing. Thank you. And please tune in again. And in the meantime, make your life a masterpiece. Aloha, y'all. Mahalo for tuning in to the Art of Vibrant Living show, y'all. I'm Daniel Aaron, and may you live with great vibrancy.